The first time she heard the cannon fire of an Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II, she was 12 years old and standing behind a chain-link fence at an airshow in Arizona. The desert heat shimmered across the runway, distorting the horizon into a wavering mirage. Families cheered as sleek fighters screamed overhead, but when the gray, blunt-nosed aircraft rolled in low and slow, something in her chest locked into place. It didn't look elegant like an F-16 Fighting Falcon. It didn't glide like a bird of prey. It looked stubborn, built, purposeful. And when its GAU-8 Avenger cannon erupted in that unmistakable BRRRRT, the sound punched through the sky like controlled thunder. Her name was Captain Elena Raven Morales. She would one day sit in that cockpit. But not yet. Back then she was just a kid who watched the hog lumber through tight turns, banking with a surprising grace for something so brutally engineered. The announcer's voice boomed across the crowd, explaining how the aircraft had been designed during the Cold War to destroy Soviet tanks, how it could absorb direct hits and still bring its pilot home, how the titanium bathtub protected the person inside like medieval armor wrapped around modern fury. Elena didn't hear the full commentary. She heard only the rhythm of possibility. A machine designed not for speed records or air superiority, but to protect soldiers on the ground. That mattered to her. Her older brother Matteo enlisted in the army when she was 15. 2 years later, he deployed overseas. The war was something abstract on television until it had a name and a face she loved. Phone calls became rare. Messages came late. Every time the news mentioned roadside bombs or insurgent ambushes, she imagined dusty convoys and open desert roads and wondered who watched the skies above them. When Matteo came home on leave, he told her about close air support. About the relief of hearing that distant cannon. About seeing an A-10 roll in low, almost reckless, placing its fire so precisely that friendly troops felt the shockwave but never the strike. When the hog shows up, he said quietly, you feel like someone up there actually has your back. That was the moment the dream became a decision. Elena trained relentlessly. She ran before sunrise. She studied aerodynamics while her classmates worried about prom. She earned a degree in aerospace engineering and then fought for a slot in pilot training, navigating a system that still carried skepticism about women in combat aviation. She ignored the comments. She ignored the doubt. Every simulator hour, every check ride, every late-night systems exam, she saw only the gray nose of an A-10 cutting through desert haze. Undergraduate pilot training broke many candidates. 12-hour days, endless evaluations, instructors who dissected mistakes with surgical precision. She learned to land in crosswinds that shoved the aircraft sideways like a toy. She learned formation flying so tight she could see the tension in another pilot's jaw through a canopy. She learned that confidence was built not from ego, but from repetition under pressure. When assignment day arrived, she stood in a crowded auditorium with her classmates. One by one, names were called. Fighters, tankers, transports. Then she heard it. Morales. A-10 Thunderbolt II. She didn't cheer. She didn't cry. She simply closed her eyes and exhaled, as if she had been holding that breath since she was 12 years old. Months later, at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, she met her aircraft for the first time. The A-10 wasn't pretty up close. Rivets dotted the fuselage like scars. The twin turbofan engines perched high on the rear fuselage like watchful sentries. The wings were broad and straight, built for stability at low altitude. The landing gear looked thick enough to survive abuse. It was a flying tank. She ran her hand along the cold metal before climbing the ladder. Inside, the cockpit felt tight, purposeful. Gauges and multi-function displays surrounded her, but at the center of it all was the targeting pod feed, her eye into chaos below. She strapped into the titanium armor that wrapped around the seat. For a moment, she imagined the thousands of troops who had once looked up, waiting for this aircraft. Her first live fire training sortie was unforgettable. Over a barren range, she rolled inverted, pulled through, and lined up on a cluster of rusted target hulks representing enemy armor. Her breathing slowed. Her voice was calm as she called in. Then she squeezed the trigger. The aircraft shuddered as the GAU-8 fired 30mm rounds at nearly 4,000 rounds per minute. Smoke trailed behind her as she pulled up and banked away. Seconds later, the ground erupted in controlled devastation. Even through training protocols and instructor oversight, she felt the raw purpose of the machine. The A-10 was not about glamour. It was about presence. Years later, deployed to a forward operating base carved into an unforgiving landscape overseas, Captain Morales finally heard the call she had trained for her entire life. A joint patrol pinned down by enemy fire in a narrow valley. Friendly forces unable to maneuver. Danger close. She acknowledged the coordinates and pushed the throttles forward. The Hog descended through layers of dust and heat distortion. On her display, friendly positions blinked in coded symbols. Enemy muzzle flashes flickered from rocky outcroppings. Her voice was steady as she confirmed clearance. The ground controller's reply carried urgency, but also trust. She rolled in. The first pass was with precision-guided munitions, neutralizing fortified positions beyond the immediate friendly line. The second pass required the cannon. She aligned carefully, adjusting for wind, terrain, and proximity. There was no room for error. Her thumb tightened. BRRRRT. The sound tore across the valley. Enemy fire ceased almost instantly. She climbed and circled, scanning, confirming. The patrol began to move again, regrouping under the protective orbit of her aircraft. In that moment, 12-year-old Elena at the fence disappeared. In her place sat a pilot who understood exactly why this aircraft existed. Later, back at base, after debriefings and data reviews, she stepped out beneath a sky painted with fading orange. Dust clung to her boots. The aircraft behind her ticked softly as metal cooled in the night air. Crew chiefs inspected panels, checking for stress, for damage, for the invisible marks of another mission flown low and hard. She looked at the nose art. A small, fierce raven painted beneath the cockpit. Killer Chick, one of the maintainers had jokingly called her after her first combat sortie. She'd laughed at the nickname. But over time, it stuck, not because it was flashy, but because it represented something defiant. A reminder that capability isn't defined by expectation. The A-10 program had faced retirement debates more than once. Critics called it outdated in an era of stealth and supersonic dominance. Supporters argued that no other platform replicated its survivability and loiter time over troops in contact. Elena followed those debates closely. She understood modernization pressures. She understood budget realities. But she also understood the quiet voice of a soldier on a radio, asking for help. Speed mattered. Stealth mattered. Technology mattered. But sometimes, what mattered most was a stubborn aircraft willing to fly low and stay. As the desert night deepened, Captain Elena Morales stood beside her Hog and listened to the wind move across the runway. Somewhere beyond the horizon, another patrol prepared to move at dawn. Somewhere, someone would look up at the sky and hope to hear thunder. And if they did, she would answer. It no longer unfolded in wide, predictable fronts or tank columns stretching across open plains. It moved in fragments, urban blocks, narrow valleys, shifting alliances, and enemies who blended into terrain and population alike. Precision mattered more than ever. Identification mattered more than speed. And endurance, quiet, patient endurance, became the difference between a successful extraction and a folded flag. Captain Elena Raven Morales had learned to read a battlefield not just through her sensors, but through tone. The strain in a joint terminal attack controller's voice. The clipped urgency in coordinates transmitted over a crackling radio. The silence between words. The Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt 2 was not designed for the kind of headlines that stealth jets dominated. Aircraft like the F-35 Lightning II carried advanced sensor fusion and radar-evading profiles that redefined modern aerial warfare. Elena respected that. She had trained alongside pilots who would go on to fly those machines. But when it came to troops pinned behind crumbling concrete walls or convoys ambushed along mountain roads, the Hog offered something different: visibility, durability, and time. Time to circle, time to see, time to decide. One late autumn afternoon, she was scrambled from a forward airstrip after intelligence reported a special operations team compromised deep inside hostile territory. Weather conditions were deteriorating. Sandstorms rolled in unpredictable walls across the horizon. Satellite feeds flickered in and out. As she climbed through turbulent air, her targeting pod cut through the haze, painting infrared silhouettes across broken terrain. The team on the ground had taken casualties. Their exfil route was blocked. Enemy fighters had entrenched themselves across a ridgeline, controlling the only viable escape corridor. This was not a textbook engagement. High-altitude bombers would struggle with the dust interference. Fast jets could deliver munitions, but their loiter time was limited, their fuel calculations tight. The ground commander requested something specific over the net. Request HOG on station. Elena throttled back and descended below the cloud layer, stabilizing at low altitude where the A-10's straight wings thrived. Anti-aircraft fire flickered upward, small arms at first, then heavier tracers searching blindly through the storm. She maneuvered aggressively, keeping terrain between her and likely missile positions. The A-10's engines, mounted high and shielded, reduced infrared vulnerability. The aircraft's redundant flight control systems meant that even if one hydraulic line was severed, she could still bring it home. She marked friendly positions carefully. Every movement was deliberate. Danger close meant no room for ego. Her first run was surgical. A precision-guided bomb dropped on a fortified machine gun nest overlooking the escape route. The explosion carved open the ridgeline, but resistance continued from secondary positions. The special operations team began to move, dragging a wounded teammate. Elena inhaled slowly. Then she rolled in with the GAU-8. The cannon was more than a weapon, it was a statement of presence. 30mm depleted uranium rounds streaked downward, walking a line of destruction just meters from friendly forces. The recoil slowed the aircraft slightly, a subtle physical reminder of the power being unleashed. BRRRRT. Dust plumed upward in controlled bursts. Enemy fire faltered. The team below seized the moment, sprinting toward a temporary landing zone carved into rocky ground. She orbited, scanning for any remaining threats. Twice more she rolled in, each pass calculated, each burst shorter than the last. Within minutes, helicopters approached low and fast, exploiting the window she had created. The extraction completed under her watchful circle. As she climbed back toward safer airspace, the storm finally swallowed the valley whole. But the team was airborne. Alive. Back at base, the debrief was intense. Analysts reviewed targeting footage frame by frame. Every second of cannon fire measured. Every trajectory analyzed. Modern warfare demanded accountability not just for success, but for precision. That night, alone beside her aircraft, Elena thought about evolution. The A-10 had entered service in the 1970s. Critics called it aging. Legislators debated its retirement repeatedly, arguing that multirole fighters could absorb its mission set. Supporters countered with battlefield data, citing survivability statistics and close air support effectiveness unmatched by faster jets. She knew the arguments. She had studied them in professional military education courses. She understood budget trade-offs and modernization pipelines. She respected emerging platforms, unmanned systems, and the increasing role of drones in reconnaissance and strike missions. But she also knew what it felt like to descend through chaos and stay there. The next major mission tested more than tactics, it tested resilience. Intelligence had warned of advanced surface-to-air threats in a contested region. This was no insurgent group with rifles. This was a near-peer adversary probing for weaknesses. Flying low would reduce radar detection, but increase exposure to anti-aircraft artillery. Flying high would expose her to guided missile systems. She coordinated with electronic warfare assets and allied aircraft, forming a layered approach. The A-10 was never meant to operate alone in high-threat environments. It was part of an ecosystem: fighters clearing airspace, intelligence platforms feeding data, ground units marking positions. As she approached the target area, radar warning receivers flickered alive. A missile system had locked briefly before losing track in terrain clutter. She descended further, hugging contours, using mountains as shields. The HOG felt heavy but stable beneath her hands. The target was a convoy of armored vehicles advancing toward a civilian-populated town. Friendly ground units were hours away. If the convoy reached the outskirts, urban combat would become inevitable. She had one window. Her first pass used standoff munitions to disable lead vehicles, creating a bottleneck. Secondary explosions rippled through the column. Anti-aircraft fire erupted immediately, thicker and more coordinated than anything she had faced before. Warning lights blinked across her panel, minor damage to the right wing. Hydraulic pressure fluctuated, then stabilized on backup systems. The A-10 absorbed punishment the way it was designed to. She made a second pass. This time, the cannon. The recoil vibrated through the fuselage. She felt not fear, but clarity. Each squeeze of the trigger was brief, controlled, disciplined. Vehicles erupted into smoke and flame. The convoy stalled entirely. A final missile warning tone screamed in her headset. She deployed countermeasures and broke hard left, diving behind a ridge. Seconds later, an explosion rocked the air where she had been. Silence returned slowly. The town remained untouched. When she landed hours later, maintainers swarmed the aircraft. Shrapnel scars peppered the wings. One engine cowling bore a jagged gouge. But the titanium cockpit had done its job. She had done hers. In the weeks that followed, news spread of renewed discussions about retiring the A-10 fleet in favor of newer systems. Elena found herself invited to speak at a defense symposium. She stood at a podium in a crisp flight suit, addressing policymakers and analysts. She didn't argue emotionally. She presented data, sortie survivability rates, cost per flight hour comparisons, documented close air support outcomes. She described how loiter time over troops created psychological assurance impossible to quantify on spreadsheets. She acknowledged technological advancements while emphasizing mission specificity. Every aircraft has a role, she said calmly. The question is not whether the future belongs to stealth or drones or multi-domain integration. It does. The question is whether we are willing to lose a platform uniquely built for one mission, protecting those who cannot retreat from the ground. Months later, change came anyway. The Air Force announced a phased retirement schedule for portions of the A-10 fleet, transitioning squadrons to other platforms. Elena received her reassignment orders. She would move on. Her final combat sortie in the Hog came on a quiet morning. No dramatic firefight, no emergency scramble, just overwatch for a humanitarian convoy delivering supplies to a remote region recovering from conflict. She circled patiently for hours, watching children wave at trucks, watching soldiers escort medical teams into villages. It was not a headline mission, but it was the kind the A-10 had quietly made possible for decades, creating space for stability. As she returned to base for the last time in that aircraft, she requested a low pass over the runway. Clearance granted. She accelerated, skimming just above the tarmac before pulling up into a smooth climb. For a moment, the Hog felt weightless. When she shut down the engines, the familiar ticking of cooling metal echoed one final time. Crew chiefs gathered. Some saluted, others simply stood in silence. She climbed down the ladder slowly and placed her hand against the fuselage, just as she had years earlier at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. "Killer chick," one of the younger airmen said with a grin. She smiled back, not because of the nickname, but because of what it represented. She would transition to a new aircraft. She would adapt to new systems, new doctrines, new skies. The future of warfare would continue to evolve, faster, stealthier, more interconnected. But somewhere, in stories told by soldiers who once looked up in desperation and heard thunder roll across the valley, the image of a stubborn gray aircraft would remain. And so would the memory of the pilot inside it. Steel in the sky, steady when it mattered. And when the last operational A-10 eventually flew into history, retired to museums and memory, it would not be remembered for elegance. It would be remembered for staying. And Captain Elena Raven Morales, killer chick in an A-10 Warthog, would carry that thunder forward, long after the cannon fell silent.